The next dynasty we're going to be talking about is the Sung Dynasty. Now, this dynasty ruled during a period of economic prosperity and great cultural achievements. We're going to see that the leaders during this time period will establish scientific academies, if you guys think of kind of like schools in a sense, that are going to allow for the most educated or the intellects of this dynasty to kind of have freedom of discussion and thought. So what we're going to see is pretty much all of the smart people are going to get together. And what they are going to do are start inventing new things. For example, rockets, landmines, and movable type print, all of which will be making its way down the Silk Road. We're going to see, for example, the movable type print is going to travel down the Silk Road and actually inspire Gutenberg in Europe to produce his printing press, his well-known printing press. So this idea of having a highly valued educational system is going to be very, very beneficial for the Sung Dynasty. Now again, the Sung Dynasty, just like the Tang Dynasty and the Qin Dynasty, are going to believe that the most educated should be put there based on their merit versus than their birthright. So they had to work their way up to become these highly intellectual people. We're going to see that those that are really involved with politics are going to create a unified doctrine, meaning kind of like a standard law or a system, a regulated system of laws that are going to argue and kind of push for common Confucian ideals. And really, the Sung Dynasty wanted to keep it consistent. They wanted all citizens to have a common religious and philosophical ideologies. They wanted to make sure they were practicing the Confucian ideals in order to achieve the dynasty that they wanted to have. So we're going to see this time period filled with very highly educated people, and the new technologies that are produced during this time period are going to help increase the output of food. So ultimately, this time period is going to be very, very successful in the sense of trading, fishing, and farming because, again, these people are extremely smart. They were able to make rice paddies in a very functioning, structured system that would allow for mass production. As you guys can see down here in the picture on the right, this is an example of the rice paddies. So not only was this a time period of economic success as well as prosperity, but we're going to see that it is a time period of great cultural achievements. And one of the major things that the Sung Dynasty is known for is their tradition of foot binding. Now, throughout history, beauty has been a major goal. However, many cultures and peoples have very different views of what beauty truly is. In previous units, we studied, especially in the 19th century, that corsets typically would make a lady's waist smaller, as small as possible to be specific, and this was considered to be a beauty requirement. Today, body piercings and tattoos, they kind of fall under the same category. But pain pain has been suffered by women for many centuries to achieve a perceived idea of beauty. In Chinese history, this idea of foot binding is probably one of the most detrimental practices that was kind of forced upon women, practiced by women, and it was performed for nearly 1,000 years. We're going to see that foot binding is a long and painful process, and in a sense, it is done to produce a smaller foot. Modern people, such like the students in this class, may find it very hard to understand why the Chinese were doing this, but we're going to see that foot binding is going to go deeper than just fashion. So ultimately what it's going to do is going to reflect the role of women in Chinese society and, again, practice these Confucian morals. So we talked about that with these political intellects. They wanted everyone to have these same Confucian ideas, even when it came down to the way you looked. So this is going to be discussed later in section 2, but definitely take note of that this idea of foot binding would also enforce these Confucian moral values for women. In the Chinese society, it was necessary for a woman to have bound feet in order to marry and as well to achieve a good and moral life. The first definite evidence of foot binding is going to date all the way back to the Sung Dynasty from the tomb of Lady Hung. She was the wife of an imperial clansman. Her feet were bound actually in strips of gauze, and she wore shoes that were only 5.5 inches long. So the story goes that it was practiced because her prince loved her little feet. Again, they're only about 5 inches. And she had this great ability to dance, and she walked very gracefully. So others oftentimes copied this desirable look. As you guys can see in the picture here on the left, that is what a bounded foot would typically look like. Now in the right, you can see these smaller embroidered slippers. These also came to China during the time period. The lotus, the sacred flower, is associated with Buddhism, which we will look into later in this unit, is also going to become associated with these small shoes. This tradition is going to be practiced all throughout the Sung Dynasty and will continue until the 1950s.